Building a financial foundation. Financial security is not a dream, it can be a priority. In this workshop, we're going to discuss how you can build financial security for you and your family. Thanks for tuning in. You can build a proper financial foundation by taking control of your future. Here are the challenges that most people face when they're trying to build up their financial base. They are, how do I protect my family? Like against life, health, and disability. How to reduce expenses so you can get out of debt sooner. Dealing with the constant changes of job, career, business, as well as living a long life without adequate income. Here, we have a bunch of solutions. And really and truly, like building a house, you have to build it from the ground up. Truly like a foundation. That house, the base is talked about protection. Protection comes in the form of, think of it like risk management. So that'll be things like life insurance, health insurance, disability insurance. Next up is debt management, followed by building up your emergency fund and investments. And of course, real estate investing would count as part of that investment strategy. Here, we're going to talk about making money, saving money, growing it, and of course, protecting your money. First off, we have to talk about wealth because with wealth comes responsibility. And one of the best ways we've seen to present this is called the X curve. Here's why. The wealth formula is money. We've all heard money, right? And then we know that time is money. Why is that? Because over time, your money has the amount of time to grow. It grows with a rate of return. Now that rate of return can either be positive or negative. If it's positive, that means your money grows. But if it's negative, that means you lose money. And then there are two silent killers of wealth. Those are inflation and taxes. So whatever money you have, plus the time it has to grow, plus or minus the rate of return, and then subtracting inflation and taxes, that's the wealth that you're left over. That's the wealth that you have, right? And you can build a successful financial future by keeping all these intact so that your wealth can grow. Here's the wealth curve, or the X curve. You know, like on the left-hand side when you're younger, like I am now, you're busy taking care of your family, and you're less secure. You have a lot of responsibility, as you can see in the blue curve. It's really high. And your wealth is still low because you're building it up, as you can see in the orange curve. But as we get older, we start taking care of our future. At that point, we're more secure. We have more wealth, and we have less responsibility. Any children that we have grown up and gotten out of the house, and our parents no longer need us because they've passed on at that point. You must take care of your responsibilities while building your wealth. That's essentially the paradox of life, is that we have to do all of it. We can't just wait until we're older to start preparing for our own future. We really have to start today because nothing is promised, and that's the truth. Now we're going to talk about how money works. And the first way that money works is through the power of compounding interest. Okay, so let's talk about the rule of 72. The rule of 72 says, if you take an interest rate and you divide 72 by that number, it tells you the amount of time it takes for your money to double. Here's an example. Let's say I have a 4% interest rate. If I take the number 72 and divide it by 4, I get 18. So that means my money will double every 18 years. So what does that mean practically? If I have a 4% interest savings account and I put $10,000 in the account when I'm age 29, that amount of money will double in 18 years or when I'm age 47. And then that'll double again in another 18 years when I'm age 65. Make sense? But let's say I find an 8% return. That means my money will double in half the time or every 9 years. So that same $10,000 I put into age 29, by the time I'm age 65, that doubles to $160,000. Now let's play for the big leagues. Let's say I get 12% return. That means the money doubles every 6 years. So if I'm age 29 and I put in $10,000, by the time I'm age 65, I have $640,000. That, my friends, is the rule of 72. But I do want to point out a major rub. Here's the rub. The rule of 72 can work for you or against you. So we've just talked about interest rates as it relates to savings accounts. But what if this was credit card debt, right? Most credit cards start at 18%, go up to 21, 27, so forth and so on. So the rule of 72 can really work against you because the higher the interest rate, the more and more quickly that money is doubling or that debt is doubling. So the difference between $10,000 at 4% versus at 12% was $600,000. And really and truly, $600,000 is the equivalent to 20 years salary of somebody that makes 30 grand a year. That's a whole lifetime of earnings. We got to understand the real rate of return. The truth is, the effect of taxes and inflation, they can erode your purchasing power. Here's an example. Let's say that you save $100 and you put it in an account that will pay you 3% interest. You have to pay tax on that interest, which is 75 cents, assuming a 25% tax rate. So after taxes, you have $102.25. Now, inflation is at 3.5%. So 3.5% on your original amount of $100 is $3.50. So your actual return after you pay taxes on your gains and after inflation is $98.75. Ultimately, you lose. Let's say, in another example, you save that same $100, but this time you get 5% interest. Same tax rate at 25%, and inflation is the same. At this point, you get an actual return of $100.25. What does this mean in real life? It means you must get about 5% or more in interest just to beat inflation and taxes. And we know it's true, right? The cost of living in the United States in 1978 was a bargain. The average income was $17,000, and the cost of a new house was $54,800. Well, I live in Columbus, Ohio, so I can probably get a house for that cost at the same time. But it was not a McMansion, right? I can only get like a little smallie, like a Monopoly house for that price. You can find out more about that in other portions of Housing JV, other courses. In 1978, average rent was $260. The cost of a gallon of gas was only 63 cents, and a dozen of eggs 48 cents. And the cost of a brand new car, a Chevy Nova, was $3,823. As we know, the cost of things has definitely increased a lot in the past 40 years, and it's showing no signs of slowing down. So that's really what inflation does to you. It erodes your purchasing power. Essentially, these are uncertain times, and we need to do everything we can to be certain in times like this. We have to know the risks. Let's do some math. Let's compare Mr. A and Mr. B. They both have $100 to invest, and let's compare who ends up better in the following scenarios. In scenario number 1, Mr. A gets 40% returned in year 1, while Mr. B just gets 10%. And year 2, Mr. A loses 20%. Mr. B gains 10%. So if we combined what their average interest rate was, they both average a net of 20% return, total return. However, the actual arithmetic or geometric return is different. Why is that? Well, Mr. A went up 40% in year 1 to 140, but that 20% in year 2, he hit him hard. So he went all the way down to 112. Versus Mr. B, we're slow and steady with 10 and 10, and so he actually ended up with $121. So it's not just enough to know what somebody's total rate of return is. It's really about that geometric return. And as you can see, the more losses we can mitigate, the better we are, even if we don't swing for the fences every single time. Slow and steady, kind of run the race. So let's look at scenario 2. Okay, scenario 2, Mr. A goes up by 50%, and in year 2, he goes down by 50%. Mr. B holds steady both times. Again, both guys net a 0% annual return. Let's see how this plays out. For Mr. A, he went up by 50%, which means his $100 went to $150. But when he lost 50%, he lost 50% of that $150, which means he only has $75 left. Versus Mr. B, he's holding steady at $100. So again, sometimes it makes more sense to just hold steady and make sure that you are mitigating loss as opposed to swinging for the fences and getting the maximum return you can get every single time. The point? Try to avoid market risk. We also want to save early. We're going to compare two guys here, Mr. Start Early and Mr. Wait Longer. Okay, so Mr. Start Early contributed $3,600 per year for 7 years. Okay, and he did this in an 8% tax-deferred account. Total contribution was $25,200. And by the time he was age 48, he had contributed a total of $128,000. Or his accumulation was $128,361. Mr. Wait Longer, however, decided to wait until 7 years later, till he was age 32. He put in his money for 17 years, right? 10 years longer than Mr. Start Early. And he put it in the same account, 8% tax-deferred account. In the end, Mr. Wait Longer ended about the same way, right? Mr. Start Early had $128,000 versus Mr. Wait Longer had $131,000. However, Mr. Wait Longer contributed a total of $61,000. Here's the truth. Procrastination is one of the main causes of failure. Mr. Wait Longer ended up contributing almost 3 times what Mr. Start Early did, just to end up in the same place. So let's discuss an old adage, pay yourself first. The truth is small changes can add up to big money over time. What if you can make a small change in your spending habit and start saving as little as $100 a day or $300 a month, right? $300 a month at 8% interest after 30 years is almost $450,000. If you up the ante to $600 a month, then that means you would have $894,000. So ask yourself, what can you cut down on? Sodas, cigarettes, fancy coffee, driving a fancy car, eating out, partying. All those things are taken away from your future. It takes discipline and consistency to get ahead. We have to take a moment to talk about taking care of your family, and that includes insurance and insurability. To determine the amount of life insurance that you need, we will discuss something known as the DIME method. That is how you calculate your protection need. So the DIME method stands for debt, income, mortgage, and education. So first off, you take out how much debt do you have, right? So if you combine all your credit cards, all your loans, student loans, credit cards, anything, you add up all that debt. Because if something happens to you, they're going to need to pay it off. Your family's going to need to pay it off, right? Then you take your annual income and determine how many years you would like to replace that income for your family. For most young professionals, that is about 10 years. So in this example, this person makes $36,000 a year. So in order to replace that money for 10 years, they would need $360,000. We also take out any mortgage balances and finally any educational expenses. In this example, this person wants to pay $15,000 per year to a 4-year university, which is 4 years, so that's $60,000 for 2 children. So $60,000 for 2 children is $120,000. So the total amount of insurance they're going to need is $730,000. Most people, it's funny, they have good protection on their homes, good home insurance, good car insurance, even good cell phone insurance. But a few people have enough insurance for their loved ones. And you want to do it sooner rather than later because really and truly, life insurance is based on your life expectancy and how insurable you are. Okay? So essentially, there's a lifetime risk of cancer. The risk of developing cancer and the risk from dying from cancer. In men, 1 in 2 men is expected to develop cancer and 1/4 of men are expected to die from it. In women, it's 1/3 of ladies will have a risk of developing it and 1 in 5, right? So 20% of ladies risk dying from a form of cancer. And it's not just that. An estimated 80 million Americans have 1 or more types of heart disease. And heart disease is the leading cause of death in the United States. And it's really a silent killer. To put insult to injury, the average healthcare cost in retirement for a 65-year-old couple exceeds $200,000. If they were to go to a nursing home, that means $500,000. And the truth is, 70% of seniors will need some type of long-term care within their lifetime. In truth, we have to prepare in case you die too soon in the form of life insurance. And we also have to prepare in case you live too long, which life insurance can also help with living benefits, as well as other products known as annuities. So when we talk about building your financial future, let's talk about the 20-year annualized returns by asset class. And this is just a snapshot in history, right? So we're going to look at 1993 to 2012. And these different asset classes are the S&P 500, which is an index account, an index of the stock market, bonds, certificates of deposit, houses, and what the average investor gets. So the average index in the stock market, S&P 500, returned annually 8.2%. Bonds, 6.3%, CDs, 3.5%, homes, 2.7%, and the average investor eked out a measly 2.3%. So you have to ask yourself, where's most of your money invested in? And all this is before taxes, right? So even if you're getting these returns, is your investment in a taxable, tax-deferred, or tax-deferred account? All these things are very important. So we have to get started now, right? So that we can have managed growth. We want to manage our growth with safety, tax advantages, and of course, downside risk protection. So when you think about the plan that you have for your future, can it potentially grow to achieve your goal? Is it safe enough? Does it have tax advantages? And does it have the proper protection for your family? Ideally, here's how we want to do it. We want to reduce debt. We want to pay ourselves first. We want to make more money where we can, and while we can, build up equity, and then preserve your estate. And build that estate and build your livelihood and your financial future with confidence. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to hop onto the forums. We'd love to help you out. And of course, do sit down with a financial professional to review your situation and see how you can add some additional suggestions to supercharge your plan.